It's connecting. Okay, we're live, so let's play this little video. Go, give us some time. I don't think that did the audio play for you guys. That sounded kind of weird.
Yeah, it played.
I didn't hear it.
Yeah. Oh well. So we're live, and I'll let you know as soon as we get some people on.
All right. Yeah, I definitely heard the full send in Dolby 5.1 or whatever it is.
THX.
You did a good job with that. That's a nice little intro you got there.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So, got two people on for those joining us tonight. We're going to talk about deer hunting, because why not? We're going to talk about next year's season and not the current one, though. We have Mike Poupore joining us from Draw Land Management.
Hi, guys.
And Dennis is going to kind of run the show tonight. So, Dennis, go ahead and take it over.
All right. Yeah, as you guys just heard, that's Mike Poupore from Draw Land Management. Why don't you let the folks at home know a little bit about yourself there, Mike?
All right. So I run Draw Land Management. It's a habitat consulting agency. It's a company, and what we do is we'll come out to your property and move a few things around, walk around with you and show you where your stand should be, show you where your food plot should be, and we also install those food plots for you. If we'll advise what needs to be done to your habitat to turn it into a great deer habitat and help improve your hunt for next year.
Where are you located out of exactly?
We're out of Manchester, Michigan. It's Washtenaw County. It's right between Washtenaw and Jackson County.
How far do you travel across the state for this?
It just depends on how big the property is and how big the job is. But I've got jobs up in the thumb. I'll go out to Leslie, Michigan, down to Toledo. The other side of the state. It really just depends on how big the job is. I mean, I'm not going to travel 4 hours for a 10-acre job, but if you've got a couple hundred acres, you need me to come out, I'll travel a ways to do that. I'll stay in a hotel and we'll get it figured out.
Well, I know the season and stuff is still going on in most of the state right now. I'm just curious, when that's over, what kind of winter chores do you do as far as prep work?
It just depends on what each property needs, but on my own personal property, this year we're actually in the middle of planning a canopy removal program, and that's just a fancy way of saying let's bring the chainsaws and get some of these big trees down. We like to cut holes in the canopy every couple hundred yards, maybe a quarter acre at a time, and we'll get the canopy down and take the treetops. We'll put some conifers in there so we have some good cover for the deer. And then later in the season, once the humidity gets to a certain level and it dries out, we're going to do a pretty good controlled burn. We plan on burning about 7 acres this year, and that's fun. That's exciting. It gets your heart rate up when you do those. But key with that, make sure you got enough guys in case things go the wrong way. Which, knock on wood, we haven't had that happen yet. But weather shifts pretty quickly out there sometimes when you get that wind that kicks up.
Yeah, I was wanting to ask you too, hinge cutting. What do you think of that? Do you think it's a yay or a nay? Good thing to do?
Depends. Great question. It really just depends on the property. If you don't do it right, you're wasting your resources. If you hinge cut a bunch of trees and you cut the wrong ones, or you leave some canopy up and it blocks the sunlight out, you just wasted those trees. You're better off just cutting them and flattening them out and getting them on the ground. But I mean, we'll cut maybe a quarter acre pocket here and there just to diversify the property a little bit. Not every property needs it though. There's a lot of properties you go to that it doesn't make sense to hinge cut, but I do like a fair amount of hinge cuts depending on where you're at. It really gives you a good diversity line, which I think makes sense on certain properties. And certain trees hinge cut better than others. I wouldn't recommend hinge cutting any type of conifer. They're left better standing. And tulip poplars, aspens, those are better just a flush cut and let those sprout laterally from the root system. I wouldn't hinge cut any of those, but another good question.
What about like bedding? What are you using? You do put up bedding areas and stuff, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. That starts, like I said, with that chainsaw. I like to put my doe bedding right off the food plot, 50, 60 yards off the food plot, and then layer in those buck bedding areas, usually a couple 100 yards off of that. I've noticed that deer really like to bed on the south side of a hill where they can see everything with the wind at their back. And, it makes so they can smell in one direction and see in the other. And yeah, that makes a lot of sense too. We'll cut a lot of bedding areas in on hillsides.
Well, do you ever plant any like the real tall switchgrass or anything like that?
Yeah, that's another project. I've got a list of my projects for the year, as a matter of fact, and that's actually number 3. We're gonna. I like to order my. I don't know if you care if I plug this guy or not, but John Comp from Northwoods Food Plot Seed. I like his seed. He's a good guy, very knowledgeable, and there's no dumb questions when you call the guy. And I think his seed prices are pretty fair. So I order from him. I don't know if his seed's way better than anybody else's, but I like the guy and I like his knowledge. So I continue to support him and buy from him. But we have a couple acres of sweetgrass going into.
You're in luck, Mike, because he's a partner of ours. Real good guy, real knowledgeable.
I had no idea.
Yep.
I've tried. I don't know if you saw. I did a post last year. I planted 4 different clover blends, and one was his. And his did such a good job compared to the other 3. I used some of the other 3, pretty well-known brands in the area, and they all ended up doing okay. But his was the first to germinate by far. The weed competition, there are virtually no weeds in his seed blend. So I like to support him for that reason too. Seems like he sells a great product.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, he definitely puts in the time and dedication to make a great product. And I've used a lot of different seed companies myself, and his by far has just been outstanding. Yeah, and I've got soil up here in the northern lower too, and it just does really well. And like you said, I mean, he's very knowledgeable, and you buy from him if you have questions. All you got to do is message him, and he's on it. He'll let you know and get you on the right path.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a local guy. It's a smaller company, from the best of my knowledge, which, there's companies that sell, 500,000 pounds of seed every year. They don't need your business. This guy probably could, he uses it.
And Mike, I'm sure that, in the course of your history of doing this kind of work, you probably dealt with some pretty substantial sized properties. But, what if I'm Joe Hunter out there who maybe doesn't have the deepest of pockets, and I say, you know what, Mike, I tell you what, I got 25 acres. That's all I got. Is it worth me managing my land? Like, can you help me, Mike? Can I do something on 25 acres that matters? What would you say to that person?
Well, I'd like to see an aerial photo to see if it makes sense. But yeah, absolutely. I have a 10-acre consultation next weekend. I'm going out and visiting with a guy. He's not too far from me, so it's not that big of a deal to drive out there. I'm going to probably spend 4 hours walking 10 acres, and hopefully we'll get him set up. I know he's got big bucks in the area. He just hasn't been able to capitalize on it yet. And nothing is, the paycheck's nice, don't get me wrong, but nothing's more rewarding than getting that picture when that guy has his hands around those antlers, or his grandson is able to shoot that nice buck. So yeah, I don't think there's a problem. 10 acres, 20, 30, 50 acres. The average size parcel that I go to is about 40 acres. So 25, as long as the topography is halfway decent and, there's enough vegetation on it, I don't think that's a problem at all. I think somebody like that could use my advice.
Now, is there a difference for you tactically in how you approach a property that, say, is more low-lying versus, like you said, maybe has some topography features, some rolling hills, some whatever? How does that impact what you're going to propose to the client?
So topography is a blessing and a curse. Topography makes your hunt bigger, makes your property hunt bigger. If you've got a bunch of, hills and valleys, you're going to have a fantastic opportunity to get that property to last you longer in the season. Just because, there's more areas for buck bedding, for doe bedding, and you can sneak around that property a little better. When you have topography, though, a variety of topography, you also run into thermals, which can help or hurt you. If you don't know how to hunt the thermals, it'll kill you. You know, you think, oh, I'm hunting the right wind, and why am I getting busted all the time? Well, those thermals are sucking that wind right down into those where those deer are at. So I think you know, I like the topography as long as you know how to hunt it.
Yeah, I noticed the other day Facebook that you was I didn't quite pay attention to the post, but I seen that you was getting looked like a bunch of trees ready to plant. What were those?
That was red osier dogwood cuttings that I cut, and I put a post on there on how to propagate those and get those to grow on your property. And what I like about that particular species of plant is deer absolutely hammer it in the wintertime. It is a staple for them. It'll get your deer herd through the winter, and they're easy to grow. You know, if you do it right, you could probably get 60 to 70% success rate. Just got to find some donor plants. I cut them and make sure you have enough buds on the bottom. Put them in water for an hour, put some growth hormone on it, and stick them in the ground, stab them in the ground. Make sure you fence them off, because the deer will absolutely hammer them, especially if you do it in late winter. That is like steak to them. They absolutely love it. That is like cotton candy to them.
We call that a whitetail Slim Jim.
Oh, yeah. Yep. Yeah, and they're pretty easy to get to go, you know, as long as you put them in the right spots with some sunlight and you keep the deer off them till they're out of browse height. They really, really do well. I was able to get probably 400 or 500 cuttings last year, and I stabbed them all on the ground, and I'd say most of them took. You know, some didn't. There were some areas where they dried out, but if you do it right, they usually do pretty well.
What's some of your favorite stuff to plant out there on your property?
I'm a big fan of clover. Clover and chicory is a good 1-2 punch. I think anybody can grow clover as long as they have decent soil for it. And it's going to feed your deer herd for 4 or 5 years with minimal maintenance, other than a little bit of frost seeding to cover up some bare spots. It provides a ton of tonnage, 4 or 5 tons per acre throughout the season, which is great. And then for these guys a little further up north, I like cereal rye or winter wheat. That seems to really do a good job, especially up in the Upper Peninsula. If you can get it to grow, it's fantastic at greening up really early in the spring and getting those deer that are really hungry through that tough time. So cereal rye, winter wheat, they're one and the same, and they seem to really hammer that hard too. It'll germinate down to 37 degrees, and it starts growing. Like when you drive by these farmers' fields and you see green in early April, that's what they planted. It just seems to grow really easily and really early in the spring.
Can you maybe give us, Mike, kind of a 10,000 foot view? If I want to have food available for whitetails on my property year round, when do I plant this? And when do I plant that? Can you describe that?
Oh, yeah. So you can plant clover in the spring or the fall. If you plant it in the spring, you're going to be fighting weeds all through the summer and then maybe a drought. There's a pretty good chance it'll take, but I think that you have a better success rate of planting clover and chicory in the fall, usually sometime in early August, same time you plant your brassicas. And then you're not fighting with weed competition because the weeds are in the decline at that point. Moisture's increasing. You're getting those early morning dews that you don't get in the summertime. And then you get some thunderstorms, some August thunderstorms that really do a good job of keeping those plants wet. That's when I like to plant. But because I am so busy, I will plant in the spring as well. And you just got to be prepared for a little bit of weed competition. And you got to do a rain dance once in a while.
Yeah. By chance,
So we have
go ahead.
Oh, sorry. We have a question here from Brandon. He's up in the UP and talking about food plots. He wants to know what's your go-to to cut down acidity planting a food plot. So treating that soil.
I'm assuming it's in a pine plantation or something, right? Yeah. So
yeah, actually, yep. He's got a lot of pine around him, it says.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I try and rake those pine needles out of there first, if you can. Get as many of those pine needles out of the ground, off the ground, and then a couple doses, heavy doses of lime will get that pH up. And it may take 2, 3, 4,000 pounds per acre. My first food plot that I put in, the pH was a 5.5, which is pretty low. You want to have it close to 7. And it took about 3,200 pounds of lime to get those numbers where I feel that they're sufficient. At this point, I hardly need to fertilize. I don't need to put any more lime down. My soil is about a 7.2 right now, and everything grows and does such a good job.
So for the, all right, talking with my mute button on. So for the layman out there who just went, whoa, what are the pH? 5, 7, what?
pH is acidity. Yeah, absolutely. pH is the acidity in the soil. And most virgin ground can be anywhere from a 4 to an 8. Perfect pH, that's not alkaline, not acidic, is a 7. And most plants do best in a pH of about 7. To get that pH up from a 5 or a 4, or this acidic soil that Brandon was talking about, you need to spread lime. You can buy lime at the local conservation office. A lot of these farmers sell it by the ton. You can get if you have the area where you can get a lime truck in, they'll spread it for you for virtually nothing. It's pretty cheap. In my business, what I do is I buy a couple of tons at a time, and I'll take it out to the property and I'll spread it with a hand spreader or a spreader behind my ATV. And I could put, a couple thousand pounds of lime down in a half hour. It goes pretty quick. It goes through the spreader pretty quick. And that's going to get your pH up.
So you figure a neutral pH of 7 is what's going to facilitate the best growth. But maybe somebody says, well, what if I don't have access to lime? Or what if I just can't do that? What if there's a financial issue? Mike, can I just plant in my whatever 6.0 pH? Am I okay? Can I do that?
Yeah, absolutely. You can plant, down to a 5, 5.5. You're not going to get the same growth that you would normally get. Your fertilizer is also not going to work as well in a lower pH, but you can have a decent fruit plot with a 5.5. There's certain things that I would recommend that you would plant with that low of a pH. I touched on cereal rye earlier. That's hot. That'll grow. I mean, I've spilled that in the back of my truck and it's grown. That's how easy you can get that to grow. So I'd start with something like that. And there are things that you can plant that are more pH tolerant, more acidic tolerant than others as well. I mean, you're going to have a hard time planting corn or brassicas, things like that in a really low pH. But clover, you can get away with a 6, 6.5 pretty easily. It's not going to grow to 18 inches tall, but we're not feeding people. We're trying to kill deer, right?
So I think one thing to mention to the viewers out there too, like we're talking about all these different numbers and like, how do I know where it's at? You can go online and just type in soil test, and you can actually have a kit sent to your house, and then you just take soil samples from where you want to plant, and they usually recommend that you take them in several different spots. You send that soil in, and they'll send you back results and let you know what nutrients are lacking, what's good about your soil, and it'll even give you, how much lime to recommend how much lime to put down, or whatever other things you need to add to your soil to give the seed the most ideal conditions to grow. So just wanted to throw that in there if you're not familiar with food plots.
Yeah, if you get them in early enough, they usually get the results back to you within a week or two, and you can start getting a plan together at that point. What I wanted to say too is lime doesn't work instantly. It takes 6 months to start to amend the soil, and then it'll work for 4 or 5 years. If you might need to put some more down eventually, depending on what you plant, that will adjust your lime. But I will say that if you don't plan on putting lime down in July and planting in August, it just doesn't work that fast. It'll work for next year's plant, but it's not going to do much for this year. I like to spread lime as soon as possible. As soon as you can work the ground, I'm spreading lime.
Another good resource for people on a local level, if you have them in Lower Michigan, which I'm sure you do, up here we have the Soil Conservation District through the county. And that's a place that you can go as well and get some support with soil testing or get some consultation on types of things that you can plant. And a lot of times those individuals are doing tree sales as well.
You
Brandon
stole my
asked,
time. Yeah, you nailed it. I was just going to mention that I buy a lot of my trees from the Washtenaw County Conservation District. I buy conifers. I planted probably 5,000 conifers in the last 2 years. You can buy them for about $1 a piece if you buy enough of them. And they're transplants, so they're probably about 2 feet tall. And you can go through and you can plant. Me and my buddy planted about 2,500 in a weekend pretty quickly. And you can go and pick them up, and it doesn't look like there's a bunch of them. It's not like you need a trailer to pick them up because they bundle them in packages of 50. So great advice too. Conservation office is where you want to buy your plants usually.
so Mike, Brandon asked, I think this is about lime. Does the lime have to be tilled in? Or can you just spread it on the ground?
You can just spread it on the ground. It does not need to be tilled in. Some guys like to till it in just to get the maximum effect, but I haven't seen a difference personally between just spreading it on the soil and letting the rain and the snow drive it in, or actually tilling it in yourself.
And Mike, something I've seen, and maybe you can expand on this philosophy and share your experience, is one of the hot topics in food plots seems to be screening.
Yes.
What's screening? How do you use that? And what's its effectiveness in your opinion?
I told you earlier, I am going to do a switchgrass planting this spring, or actually in the summer, because you got to wait till the ground is warm enough to do it. But I'm a big fan of any type of screening. Any edge you can put on your property, the more edge, the better. And a 6 foot switchgrass, 6 foot tall switchgrass, it's going to provide a lot of cover, a lot of bedding area for deer. Thermal cover in these cold months, it breaks up the property quite a bit. And I have also noticed a benefit with switchgrass is you're going to start to see pheasants. You're going to start to see quail. You're going to have more rabbits than you ever had before. Put a couple acres of switchgrass out, cut in some diversity pockets, mix them up with some conifers, and you've got some fantastic bedding for deer. There's another way you can do it too. That's a perennial. You can also plant. John Count also offers, I'm going to give him another plug at Northwoods Whitetail. He offers the HD screen that I've had really good luck with. You can plant it in July once the soil temperature is about 60 degrees, and it'll be, by the time hunting season comes around, it's going to be 10, 12 feet tall, and it's really good for screening your access. And it grows, as long as you get enough sunlight, it'll grow just about anywhere. Yeah, I've seen it grow like a foot in a week. It's amazing. The drawback to that is you've got to plant it every year because it's an annual, which if you don't mind doing that, it's kind of fun. You can move it around a little bit, experiment with it. So I like doing that as well.
What kind of density do you typically plant your switchgrass at, Mike?
As far as seed per acre, how many pounds per acre? Depends on if I'm doing an edge or bedding. If I'm doing a breakup, like I want to break up an area of the property, I'll do about 8 pounds per acre. If I'm doing bedding areas, I scale that down to about 6, because if it's too thick, I think the deer don't like to be in it as much. You do 6 pounds per acre in a bedding area, and cut out some more pockets, and it seems to really work well.
By chance, do you ever install any like water sources? Or if you do, are you putting in like koi ponds type of deal, or are you guys going out there with equipment and digging a big old pond?
So that's another summer project for us this year. We're going to put a couple water holes on the property. My property is across the street from a lake, so I didn't find that it was all that necessary to have water sources in the immediate area in proximity to my stands. But I can see some value in that. So I'm going to probably go to Tractor Supply or Blaine's Farm and Fleet in the spring and buy a handful of 130, 150 gallon jugs, the tanks, the koi ponds, as you call them, and sink those in the ground. It's a little labor intensive if you don't have the equipment to do it, but I think there is a benefit for sure. A lot of people think the way with just letting them sit above ground, above grade. And I don't see that working here in a high pressure state like we hunt. I think you need to put them in the ground, make them look as natural as possible.
I got 2 of them down at the end of the street where I hunt. There's no water. I can't find no water at all in there, except for like as soon as we start getting the thaw and the first half of spring, everything gets flooded back there. But after that dries up, there's nothing. Can't find nothing.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, we're definitely getting some good trail cam pics though since I installed those in there. I got lucky.
Yeah, I
I
bet.
do a little bit of scrapping and stuff, and go to some of the rich people neighborhoods, and that's where I found my koi pines. They were,
I like it.
redid their landscape
Smart.
and got rid of their pines, and I brought them home and planted those buggers down in the ground.
I
see
think
you laughing at
I
me.
don't know. I don't know how accurate this is, but I feel that could help with this EHD problem that we have too. If they have a water source that doesn't have a bunch of mud in it or around it, I think that's going to help with the midge and avoid that EHD. Just a theory of mine. I don't know how accurate it is, but I don't think it could hurt. Let's put it that way.
Hey, Mike, something that I hear a lot when I'm talking to guys that are starting out with food plots is there's always this emphasis on how do I attract more deer to my property? Well, my neighbor does this and my neighbor does that over here. And this guy on the other side of me to my east, well, he does that. And there's always this like crop wars that ensues, right? But my logical brain always jumps right to, isn't the magic holding deer as opposed to attracting deer? And
I'd rather have cover than food. If I had to pick one or the other, I'd rather have the cover than the food because they can eat anything, right? Obviously, a good soybean field is going to just get the deer to hammer in, especially late season. But if you don't have the cover, you don't have much.
Yeah, I pretty much running into that where I hunt too. It's a small little 42-acre parcel, and just about all the bedding and the cover is on the neighboring property. They slip in across the railroad tracks and start eating acorns and a little bit of the browse that we got over here in the thicket. But yeah, it's pretty much a desert.
Right. Yeah. If you don't have the cover, food's important. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to diminish the fact that a food source is important because that sets up your afternoon movement. You can set up a whole property based on where that afternoon food source is. And if you don't have that, it's hard to pattern the deer. But if you don't have the cover, you're really trying to get lucky.
Oh, wow.
So Brandon's got another question here about the lime. Can you actually over lime? You put too much down.
Yep. If you put too much lime down, your pH goes too far above 7, and it will eventually come down. But having too alkaline of a soil, a pH of like 7.8 or 8.2, that's just as bad for what you're planting as having a 6.5 or a 6.2. You really want to stay as close to 7 as possible. And there are a couple areas on my property where my spreader was a little thick, went a little heavy on it. I did the soil sample the next year, and I was a 7.8 in a few areas, and that's going to diminish your crop a little bit. Also, it's not as bad as having a 5 or a 4, but there's certain nutrients that will not be able to be absorbed by the plant at too high of a pH.
So if I could chime in real quick, I think installing a food plot is not for the faint of heart. It's a lot of hard work. You're out there in the hot sun and you're getting all dirty and everything. But I'm gonna tell you, it can be a complete waste of time if you don't know the status of your soil. A soil test is the most beneficial thing you can do prior to planting a food plot. You need to make sure you need to know what you're working with and how to optimize that soil. Because I'm going to tell you, I cut corners before. I'm like, because you can throw stuff out, it's going to grow, but you really want to get your bang for your buck. So don't do all that hard work for nothing. Do the soil test. It's fairly inexpensive. You can usually do it for under $20, and it's going to save you a lot of heartache because nothing's worse than you're watching that food plot come in and it's not getting to where you want it to be because you didn't put in the work necessary. So do the soil test. I do them yearly because your soil can change from one year to the next. That's probably the best advice I can give you for food plots.
100%. I agree. If somebody, first thing I ask is, have you had a soil test done in the last year? And if they say no, I'm ordering a soil test. I'm getting that done before I even come out on the property. I want to get a soil test done and find out what I'm working with, because there's just certain things that will not grow if your pH isn't where it needs to be.
So, Mike, let me ask you this. How many years have you been doing this work?
Professionally, I've been doing it for 3 years. On my own, without getting paid for it, I've been putting food plots in for about 20 years.
So, we'll just use the round number of 23 years of experience. If somebody, is a private landowner, and maybe they're not saying, well, gee, I got to hire this Mike guy, but maybe they're thinking, I'd like to learn more about how to do this on my own. I'm a DIY kind of fella. I want to roll up my sleeves. I want to work my land. Give me your top 3 pieces of advice. The first 3 things that Mike wishes he knew starting out.
Not everything is going to grow everywhere. If you don't have enough sunlight, it doesn't matter what the bag says. It doesn't matter, shady tolerant mix. You're not going to have the results that you'd expect. A lot of guys buy certain things like, oh, this is going to work in shade. Well, they got an hour and a half of sunlight. Nothing's going to grow there. It's not going. You're not growing ferns, right? It's not going to grow there. Soil tests, I think that's huge. That's absolutely number one. Without a soil test, you're wasting money and spinning your wheels and doing a lot of extra work that you shouldn't do. So sunlight, soil test, and pray for rain. And then there are certain things that are easy to grow too. I wouldn't put soybeans in if you had 2 acres to work with, because they're going to decimate that field before the season even starts. Before you even get to shoot a deer over it, all those soybeans are going to be gone. Corn's difficult to plant too, in my opinion. If you don't, you can get corn to grow, but it's tough. It takes a lot of nitrogen. So if I were to a new food plotter, I would say start with something easy like clover and cereal rye or winter wheat. You're probably going to be able to get winter wheat to grow just about anywhere as long as you have enough sunlight. I mean, it'll grow just about anywhere. So I hope that helps. I don't know if that's what you're looking for or not, but that's what I'd recommend.
Here's an interesting one. Adam asked, has anybody tried mushroom food plots? He's in Leelanau County. I have not.
I have not either. No.
No, but I have seen deer eating morel mushrooms.
Yep.
Only the ones I don't get.
Yeah. It's funny. You always find them when you're not looking for them, and then when you go hunting for them, you can't find them. Isn't that crazy? I'll spend all day looking for them, won't find any. I'll come back. I'll go to get my truck. There'll be 4 of them sitting right around my truck.
I got a bloodhound that finds morel mushrooms for me. My buddy Chuck.
Really? Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's real good at it, man. That guy, something else.
Yeah. You had me for a second there, Dennis. I'm going, man, you need to start a kennel, because if you got a mushroom dog, there's a business to be had there.
Yeah, absolutely.
I messed with him when I last year we got out the truck and I was like, go get him, boy. And I was going, whoa, whoa. We was making all kinds of noise and shit and stuff. It was funny. Sorry, my bad.
I was going to say, you think you could breed him?
He's been trying. He just ain't found the right woman yet.
Oh.
So I'd like to, if you don't mind, I'd like to go over my top 12 things that I like to do in the off season, and maybe it'll help somebody out. Maybe it's worthless to a lot of guys, but I think if you own property, I think this might help you. We touched on removing the tree canopy first. I think it's huge to bring a chainsaw out or get a logger in if you have mature timber that you can sell. Get some of that timber on the ground if you have a closed canopy forest. Hinge cuts we talked about earlier. I think that's in some properties that really helps out. And then predator control. If you got an area that you're routinely getting coyotes on the camera, maybe you ought to spend a weekend or 2 taking care of those. I think that'll help your fawn population going forward. They eat a lot of fawns, and I think that would help. Another
Gosh,
thing I
Mapes,
like
if
to
you're
do.
listening, we need your business card for that.
There you go. Yep. Probably worth their weight in gold, right? And get rid of a handful of coyotes every year and you save 40 or 50 fawns. I like to also, in the off season, if you have stands that are hanging on trees, they've been there for a couple of years, go out and relax your straps. Do a safety check them out. Make sure your straps are in good shape. I go through every spring and I relax the buckles on my straps. A lot of stands we move too, but if you can just give that tree a little bit of growth room in the off season, and then go through in September and tighten them back down. But do those safety inspections because that's going to save your life. Another thing I like to do this time of year is I do a recap. Me and my hunting buddy will sit down together and what do we gain from the season? Yeah, we killed some deer, but what do we learn? What would we change for next year? Is there a stand that needs to be moved? Is there a different entry point that we need to take into a certain spot that, hey, every time I rode through here, every time I got in this area, I blew deer out of this bedding area. Well, you figure out a different way to get in there. So it's just nice to have a recap at the end of the season while it's still fresh in your head. You can do the same thing every year and have similar results, but we're trying to improve. We're trying to get better every year, and that's what we do. Another thing I like to do is I'll mark my trails. I go through when there's a good snowfall on the ground, and I'll spray some trees where these trails are at, just so they're fresh in my head, so I know where to move a stand for the next season. Prescribed fire, a lot of people could benefit from that. Like I said earlier, it's not for the faint of heart. If you, I took a class on that through the Washtenaw County website, and it was about a 4-hour class, and you learn what to do and what not to do. And main thing they teach you is have a fire break in place, and it's not that intimidating if you know what you're doing. And then, like you said earlier, I think you touched on a great thing. If you can get your tree orders in through your conservation office, I think that's huge. You can get a lot of trees for a pretty good price as well. And then if you can frost seed your clover, any bare spots in your food plots, you can frost seed this time of year and usually have a good stand next year. So,
Mike, is there a specific time of year for tree orders that you typically utilize?
Right now, yeah, you can January. Usually they open up ordering the beginning of January, and you can pick them up. Usually it's Earth Day every year. April 20th, you go pick them up and get them in the ground right away if you can, within a day or so.
So let's talk about trees for a second. So what kind of trees, are you talking about here? Are you talking pine for cover? Are you talking like oaks for, food, or, what kind of trees are you talking about?
I like to plant white spruce for deer cover, especially in an area that gets a little bit of shade. They usually do okay. They don't do fantastic, but they do all right. Whenever I cut down a canopy, I'll take those treetops and I'll tuck in some spruce, some white spruce, white pine. Norway pine does all right too, as long as you get enough sunlight. And then fruit trees. I'm a big fan of planting some apple trees around a food plot. I've got, I think, almost 70 fruit trees on my property now, and it's amazing how the deer just absolutely hammer those apples.
What do you think of crabapple trees?
I love them. They're my favorite. I love a crabapple tree. Mainly because they're more disease resistant than some of these other varieties. Everybody likes to plant a Honeycrisp because they can walk by and grab an apple off the tree on the way to the stand, but they can be tough to grow. You got to spray them for cedar apple rust and some other diseases, where crabapple trees are pretty immune to that kind of stuff. And there are some regular varieties of apple trees that you can plant that they avoid some of the common diseases that most apple trees get. But planting a Honeycrisp or a Fuji or a Gala, there's a lot of maintenance that's going to go into that type of an apple tree.
See, I noticed with the crabapple trees, they really hang on to that fruit for a while.
Yes, they do.
Before you see the trees bare.
Yep. Hang on one second. I got to let my cat out real quick. I'll be right back.
I thought I heard a cat.
Yeah. He likes to be in here. He climbs on this bear behind me and thinks it's his buddy,
Mike, do you think there's any value to hard mast versus soft mast? Does that matter? Is it a geographic thing? any merit to that argument?
Yeah, I would not go out of my way to plant. And I know there's a lot of guys. I'm 50 years old. Planting oak trees, it's going to be 25 years before that first acorn drops, or 10, 15 years. I don't know what the life cycle is on it, but most acorns don't start dropping until the tree's, at least 20 years old. So I don't see a lot of value in that. But you can get an apple tree to start dropping apples in 4 or 5 years, and I'm talking a lot of apples. Pear trees are really easy to grow, and you get a lot of fruit off of them too. And they seem to hang on for quite a while. I don't think pear trees get as many diseases as apple trees. But as far as one over the other, I'll take, any fruit tree, apple, pear, persimmon. If you're far enough south to get a persimmon to grow, that's an absolute hot button for these deer as well. I've got a handful on my property I planted about 4 years ago. Haven't got any fruit out of them yet, but they're about 10 feet tall now. So they can make it through another winter or two. I think I'll be in the clear.
What about on your property, your personal property? Do you use scrape drippers or anything like that, or put in licking branches?
Yeah, I
Box
sure
scrape?
do. I like to have a licking branch in at least half of my stand locations that don't have another draw. I ended up putting about 16 or 17 licking branches in on my property in the last few years, and it's amazing. It's a camera trap. You can get a good inventory of the bucks in the area too, because I don't care whether it's a spike or a 12 point, they're going to all come and bump their nose on it and see who's been in the area. And it gives you an opportunity to get that deer to focus on that instead of, hey, what's in the area here? What else is going on? It kind of distracts them a little bit. It just gives them that focal point.
Do you run a dripper at all?
I don't. What I do is I'll hang a vine from a rope hanging across the trail. I'll scrape it out and pee in it. I'll start it myself. And
Right.
It seems like that does just as good within a day or so. You got every deer in the area visiting. I don't use a dripper myself. I haven't seen the need to. I haven't seen much of an advantage one way or another. And it may work. It may be fine, but I found just peeing in it myself to get it started. And then the other deer are going to come by and pee in it.
Yeah, I'm just curious if you did run them or not, and if you was running them all year. Myself, I don't run them all year. I usually start putting them out towards the end of August. I'll start putting in mock scrapes with a dripper. But yeah, I've heard that you can run them all year.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, no, great question for sure. I've noticed that if you within a day or two and if you hang them, you're going to get some opportunity. You're going to have at least a handful of deer starting to visit them. I was amazed. I hung one, a buddy of mine, his name's Roger. He's like, hey, you put out your licking branches yet? I was like, licking branches? No, there's branches all over. What do you mean? Put a licking branch out. So I kind of thought, I'm going to do some research on this. So I put one out, put a camera on it, and my goodness, it seemed like every deer in the neighborhood within a week started to visit it. And I'm a firm believer in those now.
Yeah.
On that topic, Brandon asks, have you or anyone used the rope lure setup? So there's a lot of different places that set rope with the spray. Has anybody tried that and had success with it?
I have not tried it, no.
So I used a product, and this was several years ago. I don't even think it's in manufacture anymore because I believe the owner of the company passed away, and I don't think the family continued. You guys might remember this. It was called the Buck Stick.
Oh, yeah.
You remember that? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like a stick in the ground deal, and it was like a graphite rod, and it had a wrap in it, and it had the vines and different kinds of, tree trash hanging off the top, a little artificial sapling.
I got one in the garage.
Yeah, and it would come with several different scents. There was one that was for the base, the interdigital gland scent, and then there was another scent for the rub, on their forehead, and then up top in the vines, they had the orbital gland scent that you applied up top. I tried that. My deer didn't like it. My deer didn't like it at all. I actually had a doe stomp and snort at it and carry on, and they just weren't having it. Yeah, other people I talked to had success, but I did not.
Yeah, that's why it sits in the garage. Don't use it. It's just for looking. Yeah, but as far as like the rope products, I haven't used any. I'm kind of interested in knowing it and checking it out for myself. But I've heard nothing but good things about them, especially that guy that helped us out. What was that? Scrape Doctor. Didn't he donated a few of those for the kitty event last year.
I wouldn't be opposed to trying one just to see what the reaction is to it. I'll put a camera on it, and we'll check it out. Yeah, I'd recommend it if it worked for sure. Let's try it.
I'll send you some wolf pee, Mike, in areas you don't want the deer to move. You can use that.
All right, I got a couple of neighbors that work great for them.
That's great.
It'll save me an Irish Spring throwing it over the fence.
So, Mike, you definitely have things dialed in really good on your property. You put in years and years of work to, make it what it is today. Let's talk about the guy that just bought a piece of property, and he's out there right now scouting the land. What kind of things do you look for when you first get a piece of property and you just got your boots to the ground? Like, what are you looking for? And then how do you use that information to begin to devise a plan on how you can manage your land?
Well, I grade each piece of property on a 1 through 10 scale. This is actually my property evaluation. It's pretty informative. I rate it on a food, a cover, a huntability and access score. What are the surrounding properties? How are they hunted? What type of neighbors do you have? How much of your property is designated to a sanctuary? And then we talked on this earlier, the topography. As you know, a property that has a bunch of hills and valleys is going to hunt a little different than a flat piece. So, as a food, what percentage of the property is dedicated to food? Is it a 1 season food source, or do you have a 3 season food source with multiple, different areas that will generate food for the deer at different times? Anybody can feed their deer in July. Can you get them fed in October, November, December? That's important. So I try and find the food source or recommend where to put a food source in. And a lot of people think, hey, here's an open area. Let's put the food here. Well, that's not always the best spot to put it. Sometimes that's the worst spot to put it. I'm looking for the spot that's going to give them the best access to be able to work around it. My personal property is a rectangle. We have a food plot about 100 yards from the camp. We don't hunt over it. We leave the property, we ride down the road, and we come in the back and hunt. We have a bunch of trails coming in through the back of the property. And the deer never know we're there. The food source has deer on it. They have no idea we're pressuring them. And, 10 years ago, I probably would have just walked through the food plot and, all right, I'm going to get my stand right here, and then I'm going to get out at night. And by October 12th, I'm wondering why I haven't seen any deer. So we figured out a while ago that you go around the food source and come in the back way, and you have better opportunities. So that's what I look for, is where the food source is, where to put a food source. I try and find the bedding, and then I try and set up a couple of stands for each wind direction between bedding and the food source. And, a lot of people have my standitis, right? Where, where do you hunt? Well, that's my stand right there. Well, you have one stand? Yeah, I have one stand. Okay, what if it's an east wind? Well, I sit there. What if it's a west wind? Well, I sit there. Okay, well, how's your season going, right?
Terrible.
I get I saw a couple of doe, a fawn, and a 3-point, week 1, and then a couple of fawns week 2, and now I got a bunch of nighttime pictures. Well, why is that? And it's because you walk through your food plot and sat in that same stand. The deer, sooner or later, they're going to figure out danger comes from that spot, that corner of the food plot. So that's what I look for. Access is more important. Access, cover, and food.
Mike, one of the big topics I've heard discussed in this same vein is minerals, the value and the importance of minerals. What's your personal take on minerals? Do you recommend minerals? If so, what kinds of minerals, when and where? Well,
in the Lower Peninsula, we're not allowed to bait, and that falls under the baiting law. Whether you're for it or against it, that's next week's show, right? So as far as minerals go, what we'll do is when you cut down a tree, all those minerals are in the roots and in that stump. And it's amazing how that tree is going to try and survive and push minerals up to that stump. And that's a natural mineral lick for those deer. It's amazing how they'll hit that stump that you cut down and eat all that new vegetation, because that tree was 20, 30, 50 years old. You topped it, and that tree's going to try and survive by putting up new shoots. Well, all those new shoots have a ton of minerals in them. But as far as actually putting out mineral licks and blocks and things like that, we're not allowed to do that where we're at. So I really haven't done much with it. I can see how it would certainly help if you've got the right mineral combination with calcium and salt and some other things that the deer are attracted to. I can't see it hurting for sure. And I could see how it would help produce larger antlers if it was done on a larger quantity, a large scale.
I've heard a lot of people say that selenium is really important. Is that
Yes.
Something that's on your radar as well?
Yeah, selenium, you can buy it at the local Tractor Supply for pretty cheap. I was going to mention that as well. I have some beehives on my property, and some of the research that I've done, if the bees go to if they happen to visit your selenium block for whatever reason, it can kill them. So, I try to avoid that, but I know that in certain trace minerals like selenium are great for antler development.
You'll have to forgive me for leading you into the trap, Mike. I'm showing my peninsula here, because up in the UP, we can still put all that stuff out.
Yeah, I'm not mad at you. Have you noticed that at work? Have you noticed a benefit yourself? We haven't been able to bait down here since I think 2018 or 2019.
Since
So
Whitmer took office.
Is okay, right? Yep. So I've started putting food plots in, and kind of my workaround for that rule, for that law.
In full confession, I'm not a food plotter. I am a sprawling big timber public land kind of guy. I've got 13 acres here, and the deer come through and always try to give me heck with my garden. We have a pretty substantial garden, a big apple orchard, so they're always around. I got a pond in the backyard.
You got a plot?
Yeah. The problem is it's mine.
Right.
But yeah,
I planted my wife's garden back
dabbled
here behind the house too.
Brandon says that he found a killer block this past year that the deer love. Actually bedding near it, he says. Brandon, what block is that? Do tell. Enlighten us. Dennis, do you do any food plotting? Have you dabbled with that at all yourself?
Yeah, little small kill plots. Nothing, substantial. But yeah, I've gone as far as planting a couple of apple trees too. Stuff like that. Yeah, property that I hunt. I'm actually not sure how much longer I'm going to be able to hunt it. I'll be hopefully we'll be selling this house and I'll be moving. And I have a big piece of property of my own. Well, not big, but 10, 20 acres.
That's about a $400,000 property in the lower, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Boy, land values are something, ain't they? What's it up to for tillable land now down there? Like 10 or 11,000 an acre?
Yeah, it depends on how much you buy and where you're at. But if you bought it for $6,000 an acre, you stole it. That's about the bottom of that. And you buy more. If you can buy 200-300 acres, you can buy it for a little bit of a value. But if you're buying 10 acres, you're going to expect to spend $8,000 to $10,000 an acre.
Yeah, this blue collar boy's pockets ain't so deep.
I feel you.
So that block that Brandon got is called Grainiac XL. I've not heard of that one.
Okay.
I wonder, where did you buy it at?
Mike, do you by chance know Elliot Hubbard?
The name sounds familiar, but I don't know what. Give me some context, and I might be able to.
Well, I know
with the face.
He's a very good personal friend of mine, but he also works very closely with John Comp as well. And
okay,
I've been down to his property here a couple times this year, and I have to say I was absolutely amazed with what Elliot was able to do with his property, and he walked me around and showed, and he's doing all the food plot talk, right? And it's just buzzing the tower. It's just going over my head. He's talking the densities that he's planting stuff and what he plants when and how he staggers stuff. And I'm shaking my head going, holy cow, there is some serious science that goes into this. We're not just driving the tractor in a circle and throwing some seed in the hole and clasping our hands and going, please, Lord, rain. Like, there is a full court press going on here. And it makes sense. You know, some people laugh. They're like, oh, you made a business out of property management? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
There is
Well,
a
you can do it
ton
wrong
of
and
labor.
you can do it wrong and throw away a lot of money, or you can have somebody do it and do it the right way, and it actually will save you money in fertilizer. As you said, you brought up some good questions yet earlier about seed density, and I knew you had some food plot background by asking that question. You don't get your seed density right, people think, oh, more is better. Well, it's the exact opposite. If you, like for brassicas, for example, if you plant brassicas too thick, they'll choke each other out, and you might get your turnips might end up being the size of golf balls, if anything at all. Where if you plant them at the right ratio, you're going to get just a phenomenal stand of brassica and turnips.
Yeah, and I gotta say, you know, a well-managed property too is so aesthetically pleasing. It's just a joy to walk through the property because it's beautiful.
Oh yeah, yep. Yeah, a nice food plot that's somewhat weed free, and you see that big buck come in on camera. It's a thing of beauty. I mean, that's as pretty as the family pictures, you know.
For sure, for sure. Now, do you do any of that? Like, are you one of those guys that does before and after photos? Like, you send up the drone and there's this crummy piece of property that don't look very, very nice. And then you come in, you do your work, and you take some nice aerial after photos with the drone. Have you done anything like that?
I've done a couple. My first year, about everyone that I did, I put the drone up in the air, took a bunch of before and after. I'd video me working on the tractor, and it got to the point where it was just something else to think about. And I got to the point where I was doing 3 or 4 food plots in a day in different locations. And, you know, by the time you put the drone in the air and take some videos and bring it back down and put it back in the truck and then pack everything up and go to the next job site, it became more work than it was worth. But I do still take some pictures from time to time. But at this point, my goal is to get in, get your job done correctly, and then move on to the next guy. Because, you know, I like to knock them out. There's only a certain window that you can do these things in. People think, oh, you can plant them all summer. You absolutely can't. You're not planting, you know, in July, early July or late June. It's tough to get a food plot to take. So, you know, you've got April, part of May, if you're lucky, maybe a little bit of June, and then late July through early August, and that's about it. So I try and get those done without any distractions like drones and other cameras, other pictures and videos.
I'm going to put you on the spot for just a second here, Mike, and ask you to pitch yourself. If I'm sitting back and I'm listening to this and I'm listening to you talking, why do I hire Full Draw Land Management above this guy or that guy? What is it about your organization and the way that you do things that is unique and special?
It's a great question. So what I'd first say is anybody that can turn their property on in Michigan and successfully kill mature whitetails, and mature maybe a 5-year-old 6-point. It's all relative to what that age class is in your particular area, but I can get it done in this area in a very high pressure state. And, you know, I have a passion for it. I love what I do. I'm at work at my real job 4 or 5 hours a day watching videos, learning. I constantly want to learn new things, and I just have a passion for it. I absolutely love it. Anybody can plant your food plots for you, but I try and give you a personal approach. And I'm honestly not as expensive as a lot of these other guys in town that, you know, some of these big name guys that come from Minnesota or Iowa that routinely kill 200-inch deer on their 500-acre farm in Iowa. You know, they're going to charge you $2,500, $3,000 a day to come out and visit you. Or I'm quite a bit less than that. And my goal for starting this business was to show people how Michigan has some phenomenal deer hunting if you turn your property on, you get it right. And that was my goal. And I was tired of seeing all these Facebook groups and these forums about how Michigan deer hunting sucks. Michigan's got great deer hunting. We got a phenomenal resource for deer hunting. Our weakest link is the administration and how they manage deer hunting in Michigan. But I think that we have the best cover. We got phenomenal terrain. And I just want to turn that on in somebody's head and show them, hey, look, you have a great piece of property. Let's get it going. Let's make it happen.
I think it's great to hear that you're not just providing a service, that there's a very strong, very structured educational component for the landowner. You're teaching them. You're not just showing up, taking their money and delivering a product. You're also providing a service, an educational service.
Thank you. Yeah, Michigan, you know, my motto was make Michigan deer hunting great again. And it starts with just a few little tweaks that we can do on a client's property. You know, have me out and, you know, give me a shot to show you what you're doing right, what you're doing wrong. A lot of times I'm not moving earth. I'm not changing the world. I'm just turning that light bulb on in somebody's head and say, you know, the guy that walked through the food plot and got in his box blind 14 times this season, and his grandson wants to sit with him and, you know, not seeing, hey, Mike, I want to see some deer. What do I got to do differently? It's just as easy as sometimes flipping that switch for the guy.
Here's an interesting question. Have you seen a difference between what bucks and does eat? I can't say I have. I've seen maybe the time, but
I haven't. I think no. I really, they're going to eat what they're going to eat. Whatever's on the menu. I haven't seen much of a difference between the two. You know, people say, "Oh, deer love or bucks love apples." You know, all deer love apples. You know, you got a tree that's dropping 200-300 pounds of apples. You know, they're going to hit it whether it's a buck or a doe.
So 4 or 5 hours worth of videos at work, huh?
Yeah, that's my passion. You know, I think we follow.
Catch you.
What's that?
You better not let your boss catch you.
Yeah, well,
He ain't watching, is he?
probably. I'm sure he is. If he's not, I'll make sure he knows. He sees. He walks by. He's a deer hunter too. He's pretty passionate about deer hunting as well, and he's got his own piece of property up in the thumb. So he and I bounce ideas off each other. He's the guy that actually turned me on to deer hunting about 30 years ago. Invited me up to his deer camp in La Branch. So he kind of flipped the switch for me and lit that fire under me and made it a passion of mine.
Do you still hunt up here at all, Mike?
No, he actually sold his camp. It was a really amazing deer camp. I mean, if you didn't have a shot within a half hour, it was almost perfectly managed as far as food plots, but some of them were in the wrong spots, and you know we talked about that. But he sold his property about 3 years ago to buy a smaller piece that he could manage down here. And you know as well as I do, it's an 8-hour drive to get up there, 9-hour drive to get up there. It's quite a time commitment to put the work in and get it right. So he bought a smaller piece.
Even doing what I do, it's certainly a great deal of time, money, and effort invested. It's
right.
There are no handouts in the whitetail world, are there?
No, you got to work for it, just like everything, right?
That's why we love it, I think.
Yeah.
Mike, I've got one more question for you. Let's talk about some of the tools of the trade. So if you're wanting to get into your own personal land management, what are some things you recommend that you might need? Obviously a tractor, chainsaw, like what kind of tools are you going to need to properly manage your land?
I would say you'd need a minimum of a 20 horsepower tractor on the low end. You're going to need if you're going to travel, are you talking about doing your own plot or doing somebody else's, traveling and doing like what I do?
Yeah, just doing your own, just taking care of your own property.
Okay, so you're going to need a tractor. You're going to need a chainsaw. You're going to need either a tiller or a disc. And I think there's arguments for both. I have both. Certain properties I like a tiller. Other properties I like a disc. You're going to need a cultipacker or a lawn roller to set the seed depth. You'll need a seed spreader. I like a little earth waste spreader on a bag spreader, or a solo spreader is also a good one. You need, a lot of knowledge goes into it as well. And then you're gonna need something to spread the lime on the back of your tractor. A PTO spreader, a couple 100-pound spreader works pretty well. It doesn't take a ton of money to get into it. The tractor is the most expensive piece of the puzzle, and you could probably find a used one for $10,000-$15,000, and the rest of the components are very necessary. But there's guys that do throw and go too and have, I'm going to say, minimal success, but you can put a food plot in as long as you get the soil right with a hand tiller, a $400 hand tiller and a rake. Not going to be very big, and probably not going to get the kind of germination that I get. I mean, some of my food plots look like they should be on, Better Homes and Gardens or Food Plot Monthly, a magazine. It just depends on how much time you put into getting it right. And you're going to need a sprayer. A sprayer is huge. Either a 15 or a 35-gallon sprayer, just to control the weeds and to put down foliar spray for application of food plot or for food fertilizer. So those are the main things. I'm probably missing a few things. I've got so much crap sitting around at this point, but without that, it's hard to put a food plot in.
So it's not for the faint of heart, and it's a lot of hard work too, isn't it? It's really a year-round type of deal.
Yeah, you're going to spray a couple times a year to control weeds, and if you could do all that work and you don't get a timely rain, at least a couple times a week, you threw away your time, you threw away your money. You need to have some knowledge on seed depth, on fertilizers. Those, certain food plots don't need a lot of fertilizer. Certain ones need a ton of fertilizer. Like clover, for instance, you don't need to put nitrogen down with clover because it produces its own nitrogen. Where brassicas, corn, soybeans, or I'm sorry, not soybeans, but brassicas and corn, you need a ton of nitrogen, and that's an expense that goes into that as well.
Well, you heard it here. There's a no BS assessment on fertilizer.
That's right.
You got any more questions there, Tim?
No.
How was your season, Mike? Did you do well this year? Did you get your deer?
I did. I was able to shoot a decent 10-point in the early season. By early season, I mean before November 1st. I got him October 26th. I hurt my shoulder, though. I was drawing back on him and dislocated my shoulder because I was turning the wrong way, and my shoulder got caught up in my harness, my safety rope. So I drew back, on my weak side, and I had to let down because I couldn't get through the draw cycle, and then I had to reposition my body, and I ended up taking him. He was a decent 10-point, and then during the rut, I was able to shoot my target buck. He was a really nice, I think he was 11-point that I was able to take as well. Ended up shooting him in the liver, so we had to let him sit overnight. Shot him at 3:30 in the afternoon on a throwaway day. The wind was wrong. It was a little warm out, and my buddy and I just said, you know what, let's just sit in our least productive stands. So I thought, I'm going to sit in a spot where the wind's blowing in my face, that I'm not going to do a whole lot of damage to the property, a very low intrusion stand. And about an hour into my sit, about 3:30 in the afternoon, I saw a tree shake, and I thought, it's either a squirrel shaking that tree or there's a buck rubbing it. And I look over, and it was my target buck. So I got him to come in front of me. I shot him at about 30 yards, and I grunted, get him to stop, made a bleat noise, got him to stop. But as I shot, he took another step and went, he ended up only dying about 60 yards from where I shot him. But the best decision I made in that situation was to back out, sneak down nice and quietly, and go look for him the next morning. Where 10 years ago, I would have got down, went back, ate dinner, and looked for him that night, and pushed him onto my neighbor's property and never found him. So how about yours? How was your season?
It was full of emotional highs and lows, such as is UP, Big Timber Country. But I was blessed to harvest a pretty nice 8 with my rifle. Nice. I had 47 days logged before I pulled the trigger.
Okay.
And I hunted really hard. There were some nice deer this year. As I said earlier in the discussion, we've had a couple of pretty mild winters back to back. And one of the nice byproducts of that is we saw a lot more antler development. heaven forbid, the bucks had some calories to actually put into headgear for a change. It was nice to see. But, myself, I only buy the single buck tag. So when I made that decision, my season was over. But, I have a wife and 4 sons that all love the outdoors, love to hunt. So it became all about running the guide service full time. And, man, we went all the way through rifle. And my youngest son hunted straight through the end of muzzleloader. I think he missed, between rifle and muzzleloader, I think he missed a total of like 4 sets.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Just a little animal. He loves it.
That's great.
I mentioned Elliot earlier. We hunted all the way through, and my son didn't manage to get his buck. He had this basket rack 6-pointer. He just had his heart set on. And his birthday is December 10th. And we had a family birthday party. And next we went out and pulled the camera. Every buck in the stinking woods was there the day he took off for the birthday party. Oh, he was crushed.
That's how it works.
Oh, yeah. So I ended up taking him down to see Uncle Elliot there and helping out with some doe management. And Mr. Lincoln, that's my youngest boy, he was able to take a nice doe down there at Elliot's place.
Nice. That's great. We do a rutcation at my deer camp, and I felt like my season was short. I was able to shoot my second deer by Thursday, so I had to sit at camp Friday, Saturday, and Sunday while my buddy hunted. He ended up getting his deer earlier, but he was looking for number 2. We had a deer. It was just an absolute giant that he was always just in the right place at the right time, and my buddy was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and he wasn't able to capitalize on it, but he was able to get one. And I was also able to take a buddy of mine out. He's never been hunting before, and do a late season doe hunt with him. And he's never been in the woods before. I gave him my clothes to wear, set him up in a stand, and he got real excited. He wasn't able to capitalize on an opportunity, but just seeing him out there and seeing him get excited, flipping that switch for him, as I say, that was cool.
That's what it's all about, is introducing new people to this way of life that we love. Hey.
Yeah, for sure. Once you flick that switch, it's hard to shut it off.
Yes, it is.
Well, things ran a little over an hour. You guys want to wrap it up?
Yeah, I think we did a good job.
Yeah, there's one more question here from Brandon. What do you use for the weeds in the food plot?
Awesome question. I was waiting for that one to come up. If you have a grass problem, clethodim is my go-to. It's a grass-specific herbicide. It's only going to target the grasses and nothing else. If you have broadleaf weeds in a clover plot, specifically, I like to use 2,4-D-B, and it has to have the B. You can buy it at Tractor Supply. The B has a chemical that does not kill your clover or your soybeans. It targets broadleaf weeds exclusively. The drawback to that specific herbicide is if you have chicory in your food plot, it's going to kill your chicory too. But those are my 2 go-tos. If you didn't want to use chemicals, you can also mow. You could set back your weed competition pretty heavily if you just run a brush mower over it. What I like to do is once the weed gets a little bit above my clover, I'll go through with a broad brush and just cut them down and just set them back, and then the clover will eventually outcompete it. And if you do that 2 or 3 times throughout the summer, you're not going to have a weed problem. Some weeds are tough to kill. There's a type of grass called Johnson grass, I think it's called. I don't care what you spray. It's tough to kill. It's tough to get rid of, but everything else, I've had good luck with those 2 chemicals.
But you don't have to worry about that if you buy the good seed from Northwoods Whitetails.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There is always a little bit of seed weed that gets into your, I don't care how good you are at managing it. And you can have the best seed in the world. There's going to be some weeds that, unfortunately, the neighbor's property, you get some crap that comes over from his property and ends up sticking. But, people make a big deal about weeds. A food plot with a handful of weeds in it is not the end of the world. If you've got, a perfect food plot's 100% food plot. if you got 10 or 15% weeds, it's okay. It's not the end of the world. You know, the pictures don't look as cool, but deer eat weeds too. They eat 450 different types of vegetation, and weeds just happen to be a couple of them.
We got any more questions, Tim?
No, that's it in the chat.
Well, you guys want to wrap it up?
All right. Yeah, thanks for inviting me on. I really appreciate it and look forward to seeing you out there. We'll get you set up and hopefully you'll get a bird or two.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Yep, you got it.
Yeah.
Well, let me
Thanks
know
a lot,
next
Mike.
time.
It was very good.
Want to tell everybody
Go ahead.
where you can find you one more time?
Yep. You can find me on Facebook. It's Full Draw Land Management. Just search it in the search bar and I'll pop up, and follow me if you'd like. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I usually try and put a post or two a week on Facebook, and it's all knowledge, just like what we discussed tonight. It's not, you know, I'm not going to talk to you about, you know, how to change oil in your chainsaw, but I may, you know, I may put something on there once in a while about, you know, some fun stuff that we talked about tonight, and I enjoy it just as much as you do. And I'm assuming if you follow this to the end, you have the same passion that we do.
I appreciate you being on, man.
Yeah, you got it, guys. All right. I'll talk to you
Thanks
soon.
a lot, Mike.
Yep. See
All
ya.
right. Appreciate everybody watching out there. Everybody have a good evening and have a safe weekend.
You guys too.